Educated is the life story of Dr. Tara Westover. As a child, Tara never imagined the word doctor would precede her name. Her parents had instilled in her the belief that doctors were socialists. She never attended school, never saw a doctor, and didn't even have a certificate of birth until she was 9 years old, due to her parents' distrust of the government. Tara had never had reason to believe they were wrong. To her, their family was right, and the rest of the world was wrong. It wasn't until she went to college that she began to question if her parents had raised her and her siblings correctly. In becoming educated, she began to realize a lot of her family's dynamics weren't just strange, some of them were downright wrong. A parent can teach a child whatever they want them to believe, and the child will not know whether it is right or wrong, conventional or not, normal or abnormal. Most people develop their core beliefs when they are very young. These beliefs are taught to them by their parents, and, over time, they may change, but not usually by much. Tara was the youngest of 7 children and the second girl in the family. She grew up in Idaho, on a mountain called Bucks Peak. Her 3 oldest brothers had all attended school until their dad got paranoid and pulled them out. Tara and her other 3 siblings had never gone to school, because according to their father, Gene, going to school was going against God. Gene always told his family that women belonged in their homes, not in the workforce. He believed women should be at a man's every beck and call, should never talk back or disrespect the man, and should never show any skin. Tara's family believed in the Mormon religion and attended a Mormon church, but Gene was adamant that they were the only true Mormons. He would give lectures and sermons every day in order to prepare the family for the end of days. Fear of what was to come kept Tara from questioning whether the end was really coming. Her father made them stock up on food, guns, ammo, and anything else they might need when the world ended, driving that fear even deeper into his children. Early in Tara's childhood, she admired her mother, Faye. Faye had the same beliefs as Gene but didn't voice them very often at the time. She was an herbalist, preferring the ways of nature over doctors and hospitals. At Gene's insistence, Faye began learning the ways of midwifery. It was hard work, being a midwife, but Gene insisted she continued because sometimes the work of God is difficult. This only made Tara's admiration for her mother grow. Through her work as a midwife, it seemed Faye had grown stronger, had a voice separate from her husband. She was making her own money, paving her own path in life, even though the idea had been her husband's. Tara learned from her that women could work, even if it had to be disguised as something else. Faye echoed these ideas, describing herself as a people pleaser, sometimes bending over backward in order to please her husband. These ideas stuck with Tara long after she left her parents' house. They shaped her opinion of other women and, most importantly, herself. During Tara's youth, she didn't realize that her father was mentally ill, most likely afflicted with bipolar disorder, though it would never be diagnosed. She, and the rest of her family, believed that her father was just deeply devout to the Mormon religion and that his distaste for the sinful life of the non-believers is what caused his outrage and tempers. They also believed his paranoia about the world ending was due to his religious beliefs and end of days. However, after his fervent manic episodes would come depressions that were so deep he was catatonic. The family's need to revive him led to a road trip that nearly ended all their lives and caused Faye permanent brain damage and deep physical pain for the rest of her life. This illness also seems to have been passed to his son Sean, who would demonstrate many of the same manic, abusive, and erratic behaviors as his father. Due to his mental illness and his deep religious beliefs, Gene didn't allow his children to attend public school. Faye and Gene's first 3 children did attend public school for a short time, but then his distrust in the government and people as a whole set in, and Gene refused to allow his children to mingle with people in town. He also didn't get birth certificates for his younger children, which caused a great deal of distress when they needed documentation to prove who the children were. Tara would at first resent her brother Tyler for leaving her and going to college to make something more of himself and escape the abuse. Later, she would emulate him by reading all of the textbooks he'd left behind. Tara, after several abusive and harrowing experiences, decided she too wanted out of the family business of scrapping and out of that town. She started dancing, then singing, and got a job that wasn't dependent upon her parents. The world began to open up slowly to her, and she educated herself to gain her freedom. Tara was raised in a tiny town that she was banned from participating in. When she went to college and lived with roommates, it was beyond a culture shock for her. She didn't have basic hygiene skills, and her roommates found her odd and off-putting. Tara also clung to the only knowledge she had, her father's fanatical religious beliefs. She found her roommates to be immoral and sinful, which caused her endless hours of worry and shame. It took a lot of time and several key people to convince her to study on Sundays, take care of her hygiene and clean up after herself, and to stop judging others with her father's beliefs. At college, she learned about the Holocaust, slavery, world wars, and events that her parents had never exposed to her or claimed were lies the government told to control the people's thinking. She devoured any and all information she could get, but worried that she was falling farther and farther away from her family, who had begun insulting her for becoming educated. Though Tara desperately loved her family, as she grew older and more horrific events occurred to her and her brothers, she knew she had to make a different life for herself. Following her brother, Tyler's, lead, she began to teach herself anything and everything she could get her hands on. She wanted to go to Brigham Young University and needed a 27 on her act to gain entrance. Her first test she missed the mark by 5 points, but she dug in, and the second time she took it she scored a 28. This was a huge accomplishment in her life, but it jeopardized her relationship with her parents. Though her mother would privately encourage her to go, her father would slander her and berate her for the sinful choices she was making and leaving her family to live with strangers that wouldn't practice the same as she and would tempt her to fail. By the end of her education, her family had denounced her. Her sister Audrey was terrified Sean would kill her. Her father sided with Sean and disbelieved that he abused Tara, and they all made her feel as though she were crazy and had fabricated her horrific upbringing. Thanks to her deep resolve to care for herself, her good friend Drew who kept her grounded, and the professors that believed in her, she finally earned her PhD and created a space for herself where she would never have to return to her family again. Out of her siblings, she remained in contact with her brother Tyler and his family, but saw the rest at her grandmother's funeral and never since. In creating a life for herself, Tara lost those she cared for most. She was not the same little girl who grew up on a mountain, but she was the girl who came from that mountain. The life she made for herself was one she chose to make, again and again, because becoming yourself, getting educated, is the most important thing a person can do. Tara was emotionally abused by her father, neglected by her mother, and physically abused by her older brother Sean repeatedly. His abuse became so extreme that when he was in a life-threatening accident, Tara found herself hoping he wouldn't survive so that she wouldn't have to endure his verbal and physical thrashings. Her mother neglected her and let her be abused physically by her brother and emotionally by her father. She would tell Tara one thing and then do the complete opposite, which ended up nearly costing Tara her life after Tara's sister Audrey confessed that Sean had abused her too. It would take years of this abuse and multiple attempts by Tara to try and fit her old family into her new life before she would realize it was impossible to be a part of both worlds and remain sane. Only her older brother Tyler and his wife chose not to shun her because they too chose to escape the abuse. Tara had initially gone to college to study music but found herself taking classes about history, politics, and anything not related to music. She loved learning about the ways of the world, about people, and about society as a whole. Tara wanted to be more than what her religion expected of her. She didn't want to be just a wife or just a mother. After speaking with a professor, she applied to a program to visit Cambridge University in London, even though she didn't think she'd get accepted. Professor Steinberg made it clear to her that she deserved to be in London as much as her peers, but still, Tara didn't believe in herself nearly as much. This thought was nearly reinforced by her father, who watched an interview she gave where she neglected to mention that all her schooling had been done at home. Jean, being his abusive self, sought to destroy her by letting her professors know about her lack of education, but in the end, he kept quiet. After returning to college from seeing her family during the holidays, it was apparent to Tara that there was something wrong with them. She got new roommates, but the discomfort of ulcers and panic attacks from the culture shock and the guilt and emotional distress was almost too much for her. She gained the advice of the local bishop, which was a mixed blessing. Eventually, all of the stress and nerves took its toll and Tara nearly died of strep and mono. For the first time in her entire life, she was taking antibiotics and knew that her family would disapprove and call her a sinner. It was during her illness that her father had a horrific accident and was nearly burned to death. He was unable to speak, and burns covered him. When she returned home, it was to find her family refusing to get medical help, her mother concocting remedies, and Sean abusing his wife. Finally realizing that her family was beyond help, Tara returned to college with a new sense of how far off her family had been. Educated is the life story of Dr. Tara Westover. As a child, Tara never imagined the word doctor would precede her name. Her parents had instilled in her the belief that doctors were socialists. She never attended school, never saw a doctor, and didn't even have a certificate of birth until she was 9 years old, due to her parents' distrust of the government. Tara had never had reason to believe they were wrong. To her, their family was right, and the rest of the world was wrong. It wasn't until she went to college that she began to question if her parents had raised her and her siblings correctly. In becoming educated, she began to realize a lot of her family's dynamics weren't just strange, some of them were downright wrong. Even though some pieces of educated sound fictional, so impossible to believe they could ever happen to someone, yet they are all true recountings. Tara Westover is a remarkable woman, and it is due to the hell she went through that she became the person she is today. She is evidence that it is possible to grow and become a free thinker. It is possible to leave a toxic situation and make life better for yourself. It is possible to become educated. Questions this book answers. 1. Can a person teach themselves something new? 2. Is it possible to see the truth, even if it challenges your beliefs? 3. How do you stand up to bullies when they are family? 4. Should a person take a chance on something they believe they shouldn't? 5. Is family loyalty more important than doing what is best for you?